The United States could soon be seeing a business boom. And folks, look, major investments like a $100 billion investment from SoftBank are being announced as a new push to bring manufacturing and investment back to the United States is currently underway with incoming President Donald J. Trump, not even in office yet. As this happens, we're also seeing some new support for the incoming administration from big tech. And you might remember, this is a big shift from the elections in 2020 when a lot of them opposed Trump. Now you have big tech companies and CEOs even donating to Trump's inaugural fund, which they're privately funding, by the way. And meanwhile, history was also made last week. For the first time ever, a nativity scene was displayed on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. First time ever. Now, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. Good thing, bad thing. What do you think about all these new investments coming in? And folks, let's jump into it. Also, real quick, the White House also just established the China Censorship Monitor and Action Group to monitor and address the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to censor or intimidate United States citizens. And this is a very big deal because even I get targeted by this stuff. Now, I'll be going into these topics and more today, so let's jump into it. First of all, folks, a large campaign is underway to bring manufacturing and investment back to the United States. The incoming Trump administration is working on incentives for foreign investment. It's also going to be using tariffs and taxes, right, low taxes for businesses, as methods to lure back domestic manufacturing. Now, already, even with Trump not in office, this is having a huge effect, to the extent that even the tariffs are potentially collapsing the current Canadian government, as you may have been watching. Now, major investment projects are already being announced, and business leaders are traveling to President-elect Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago for meetings ahead of the January 20th presidential inauguration. Now, already a major investment project along these lines was just recently announced. This is from SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son. Now, he's pledging a $100 billion investment in the U.S. over the next 4 years. Trump administration, in other words. Here's Trump and the SoftBank CEO giving this announcement on the investment. Watch this.
Today, I'm thrilled to announce that SoftBank will be investing $100 billion in America, creating 100,000 American jobs at a minimum. And he's doing this because he feels very optimistic about our country since the election. And many other people are also coming in with tremendous amounts of money.
My confidence level to the economy of the United States has tremendously increased with his victory. So because of that, I'm now excited to commit this $100 billion and 100,000 jobs into the United States. This is double of last time, as President Trump said. Because I say, oh, President Trump is a double down president. I'm going to have to double down, you know, $100 billion and 100,000 jobs. This is, you know, my confidence level, because that has doubled down.
Now, that's a commitment of $100 billion and about 100,000 jobs, and probably pretty high-paying jobs, in the United States. And part of this new investment could also be tied in with the recent pledge from Trump, because Trump is offering benefits now to anybody making an investment in the United States of $1 billion or more. This is him announcing on Truth Social December 10th. He said, any person or company investing $1 billion or more in the United States of America will receive fully expedited approvals and permits, including, but in no way limited to, all environmental approvals. Get ready to rock, he said. Now, look, there are some questions over how absolute that promise can be. It's going to be assumed there's going to be at least some red tape in the way, depending on the type of project. But having a more expedited process, meaning that it's not 100% cleared for massive investments, that could be likely. Now, look, folks, we're also seeing some new support for the incoming Trump administration from big tech and all these big tech leaders. This is a very big shift from the elections in 2020. Some of the big tech leaders did not seem to particularly like Trump at that time, but that has changed now this time around in 2024. Trump began winning more support from industry leaders. And I'd say part of that is probably because they're getting sued up the wazoo all throughout Europe and Latin America. And now, leading up to the presidential inauguration, it seems there are some key meetings underway right now. Breitbart said this. It said, as President-elect Donald Trump gears up for his return to the Oval Office, a growing number of tech industry leaders are making their way to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, seemingly in an effort to court the incoming administration. Now, I know it's the latest high-profile executive to join this trend is Apple CEO Tim Cook, who had dinner with Trump at the resort on Friday, marking their first in-person interaction since a phone call 2 months ago. During a mid-October appearance on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, Trump revealed that Cook had called him to discuss the European Union's $15 billion fine imposed on Apple. And this is important because those European Union fines are also targeting, for example, Facebook and Meta and other big tech companies. And the argument in Europe is that basically America has a monopoly on high tech, and some European governments are basically funding their governments by fining American companies. Companies can't really do much about that because it's coming from different governments. Now, it notes here that Cook's visit to Mar-a-Lago comes on the heels of other tech giants stepping forward to support Trump's inauguration. OpenAI's Sam Altman has pledged to personally donate $1 million to the inaugural fund, while Amazon, funded by billionaire Jeff Bezos, who also owns Washington Post, by the way, plans to contribute $1 million in cash and an additional $1 million in kind by streaming the January 20th ceremony through its Prime Video service. And notes also, Trump also mentioned an upcoming meeting with Bezos, whom he has previously criticized. And I'd say they criticized each other quite a bit. It also notes that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who also recently visited Mar-a-Lago, has already donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund. This move, along with contributions from other tech companies, signals a shift in the industry's approach to engaging with the incoming administration. They all seem to be coming to Trump. Now, look, part of the speculation on the sudden support within big tech, again, is that many of these companies are grappling with severe foreign regulations, including lawsuits, including massive fines from foreign governments, which means that you can't really challenge them in court. They just fine you and you have to pay it. Some in the areas of the billions or hundreds of millions. Many companies, they can't really do much about it. You might have seen, for example, when Twitter, X with Elon Musk, was facing charges in Brazil because Brazil wanted to censor Brazilian Americans, right? Because they were saying things they didn't want to have said on X. X, under Elon Musk, which has stood for free speech, tried pushing back, and they couldn't in the end. They had to fold to foreign pressure. Now, it's possible some of these organizations and heads of these companies are looking to the president to defend American companies from foreign pressure, because there's only so much an independent company can do to push back against a foreign government. You need that to come from the presidential level. And it seems that they're looking to Trump to maybe play that role, or maybe something else, who knows? Maybe to defend them again, maybe in the US and move manufacturing stuff and all their projects back to the United States. Who knows? But they are coming to Trump right now. Now, look, in other news, ABC News has agreed to give $15 million to Trump's presidential library to settle a defamation lawsuit. Epoch Times said this. It says ABC News and its anchor George Stephanopoulos have reached a settlement with President-elect Donald Trump in a defamation lawsuit. Trump sued him for defamation, and they agreed to pay a $15 million charitable contribution and pay $1 million to cover Trump's attorney fees and issue an apology. Now, it notes the case stems from Trump's allegations that Stephanopoulos defamed him when stating during an interview with Mace that a jury found Trump liable for rape. Trump said that was a defamatory statement. And it's the ABC interview followed 2 civil lawsuits in New York filed by author E. Jean Carroll, who in 2019 accused Trump of sexually assaulting her way back in the 1990s. And notes that while the jury rejected her claim of rape, which it did, by the way, and a lot of people have forgotten that, it did hold Trump liable for sexual abuse. In other words, the jury determined Trump did not rape her, but they held Trump liable for sexual abuse. Now, Trump has consistently denied the allegations. And about a week after, it says on the March 10th interview, Trump filed a defamation lawsuit against Stephanopoulos in the Southern District of Florida. Now, the settlement took place shortly before the case would have been open to discovery. In other words, it never went to trial, right? This defamation case. They settled before that could happen, and ABC is going to apologize for what they said. Now, if they had opened this to discovery, it would have revealed the internal communications of ABC, and in particular, all of their conversations about Donald Trump. An important thing with defamation lawsuits against public figures and organizations is that you have to establish malicious intent. You have to establish that there's some malice involved. They don't like the person for some reason in order to say that, they are guilty of defamation. And the purpose of opening things up and looking at all their communications is to see whether they had personal communications saying they hate Donald Trump or they dislike him or whatever else, things demonstrating inherent bias and malicious intent. And it was not able to go to that point because they settled before that could happen. This case is also sending shockwaves right now through the news industry, though, given that many other journalists and influencers, a whole lot of them, made similar statements against Trump. How many people have you heard saying Trump raped somebody? Legally, he did not. Legally, the jury determined he did not. That never happened. Trump is not guilty of that. But how many people have you heard say that? This is raising questions, this new case, of whether Donald Trump's legal team is going to seek similar defamation charges against a whole swath of other journalists, news organizations, and public figures, because a ton of them have been saying this over and over and over again. And again, ABC just lost $15 million on it. Now, alongside this, the news industry itself is facing a whole lot of other problems of its own. Trump has suggested that he is going to bring an end to the so-called censorship cartel, as he refers to it. And this may open up some companies to potential lawsuits or even criminal charges, particularly, I would say, maybe even antitrust violations, which is something Trump has brought up. Because, again, if you have a news organization collaborating with big tech and other organizations to go and censor their competitors, to shut down their competitors, and make it so they can't compete on even ground, you call that an antitrust violation. You might even call it racketeering, in fact. But look, even without criminal charges or possible lawsuits, the end of censorship on social media and news advertising, because there are ad companies that basically control where people can put their ads, and a lot of news organizations even target the advertisers of their competitors when they do hit pieces, and also not to mention search engine rankings and so on and how they manipulate those. If all these controls come to an end, it means the corporate news establishment, all the old legacy media, could soon have to compete on a level playing field with all the new and independent outlets. And that's freaking them out. Even ahead of all of this, many are now getting ready to compete with up-and-coming outlets that are already winning in many cases on the battle of public support. If you look at the views that Joe Rogan gets and compare it to most of the legacy news, you can't even compare it, right? Look at the views that some online influencers get and compare them to the views of major news outlets. You have independent journalists and influencers getting more views. CNN's Van Jones actually raised this during a recent event. Watch this.
The mainstream has become fringe, and the fringe has become mainstream. There are platforms, there are people out there that are getting 14 million streams, and we're on cable news getting 1 or 2 million. And so there is a whole world out there. Kellyanne Conway, I hate to agree with her, but I do a lot of times. Donald Trump understood that and we didn't. And that's not just Democrats that don't. The entire political class is way off, way off, way off.
Now look, I'd say he's right. The so-called mainstream has become the fringe. They only maintain the mainstream because they have the major controls over the system. And the so-called fringe has become the mainstream. And here's the issue with it. The issue is alternative media, right, with them, the fringe, they have more views than the legacy news outlets. how do you define what decides, what's fringe and what's mainstream? Well, mainstream is decided by whatever holds the dominant audience, right? It is the mainstream of who dominates public attention. If alternative media has a bigger audience, then does that not mean that they have that they're the ones who become the mainstream and the corporate media have become the fringe, right? It's an issue, again, of who dominates when it comes to public attention. Who is resonating more with the mainstream of the public audience? Who is resonating more with the average person? And if you look at who's resonating more with the average person and compare, again, different news outlets, different online sources, frankly, again, the mainstream has become the fringe. Now, look, this shift could mean a lot for what's about to come for the news industry, though. It seems very likely we could be watching the old guard of news start to collapse. We could watch, and we're already seeing it, I'd say, to an extent, the official rise of new media. Because it seems that the new fringe, aka the legacy news, can no longer compete in the same space. And a lot of them are desperately trying the way they cover change the way they cover the news, because they're realizing that the game is changing and they can no longer rig it in their favor. Now, in other news, folks, history was made last week in a big way. For the first time ever in the entire history of the United States, a nativity scene was displayed on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. The Christian Post said this. They said, for the first time in history, a nativity scene was displayed on the steps of the U.S. Capitol Tuesday, marking what organizers say is a milestone for religious freedom and the First Amendment. It notes the display, accompanied by prayer, Christmas carols, and a reading of the Christmas story, was made possible by a landmark federal court decision that granted Reverend Patrick Mahoney and his supporters the right to peacefully celebrate the Christmas season on Capitol grounds. And as it held on the southeastern steps of the Capitol, the display was a culmination of a legal battle that began over a decade ago. They've been fighting this for over 10 years, when Mahoney, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Christian Defense Coalition, faced repeated threats of arrest for his attempts to read the Christmas story from the Bible and hold a nativity display at the Capitol Christmas tree. Now, it notes as well, just recently, May 2024, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., ruled in Mahoney's favor. They found that he's the one in the right? And they declared this Capitol steps to be a public forum where peaceful demonstrations could no longer be prohibited. This decision set a precedent, it says, that ensured the steps of the Capitol could be used for public expressions of religious faith, including the display of a nativity scene. Now, this is really a landmark event for religious displays on government property in general, right? Part of this, you could say, is just about the Capitol steps and whether that's a public forum. But really, there's been a long debate in this country over this so-called separation of church and state, just in general, right? Some have taken the separation of church and state, which, by the way, is not written in law. It was in Jefferson's letters, but has again been taken as if it's law. Some have taken the separation of church and state to mean that religions cannot be interfered with by the state, right? Some have taken it to mean that religious institutions should not be able to get involved in politics, that somehow it's a restriction on religion. In reality, according to the First Amendment of the Constitution, which does define freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and freedom of religion, right? That is actually where it comes into play. The older interpretations on legal protections on religion suggests that it was actually about preventing the suppression of religion by government, that religion should not be regulated and controlled and pressured and changed and silenced, and not the other way around, that religious people somehow couldn't get involved in politics. It's the other way around, right? And others have raised the point of what the law would be if it was fully separated from religious values. What is government without religious value? What is law without religious value? I would say that law is almost inseparable from some form of religion, the idea that murder is wrong, the idea that stealing is wrong, the idea that harming another person's self-interest is somehow wrong. these things really do come from religion. And when you get into the nuts and bolts of law, it's almost impossible to separate it in some regards from religious values. Now, it is very likely we're going to see more events like this. The legal case that just happened in D.C., it could still be argued up to higher courts. This may not be the end of it, but it basically upholds religious demonstration as being protected under the same constitutional law as any other type of free speech. And I would say again, if you read the First Amendment of the Constitution, it's pretty much there, right? Now, in other news, the Chinese Communist Party is actively trying to export its religious persecutions to the United States. The Chinese Communist Party on the far other end of religious persecution, which again persecutes just about every major religion. They again persecute Christians, they persecute Muslims, they persecute Buddhists, they persecute Falun Dafa practitioners, they persecute any other organized religion they can because they recognize them as threats to the atheistic rule of the Communist Party. The CCP wants to bring that here to the United States. And this has been revealed in leaked documents and communications going up to the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP's current plan is to feed disinformation that it's putting together on different organizations, feed that to controlled journalists and influencers, it's little puppets here in the United States, have them frame hit pieces, then use those hit pieces to create legal attacks against its targets. Right now, the main target of this CCP campaign is Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, a Chinese religion based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The CCP deems them a threat to the state because, again, the values of Falun Dafa go against the communistic theories and values, again, which communists believe in struggle between earth and man, struggle with heaven, and again, social struggle. Now, in particular, this new targeted system, right? It's going after businesses in the United States that were started by Falun Gong practitioners. That includes the Epoch Times, that includes NTD, that includes Shen Yun Performing Arts. And right alongside this, interestingly, the New York Times has been publishing an ongoing series of hit pieces against Shen Yun. It's been exposed of concealing CCP ties to some of its sources. The New York Times did not mention some of its sources has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. An individual who took credit in helping the New York Times is also a key figure who was actually named in the CCP's documents as being a tool for carrying out its operation. The New York Times notably has a long history also of appeasing the Chinese Communist Party and covering up its genocide against Falun Gong. And it seems this campaign is having some real-world consequences. Shen Yun, right now, is receiving death threats, including threats of mass shootings at its performances right here in the United States. Epoch Times said 2 U.S. theaters have received threats of a mass shooting if they proceed with hosting performances by Shen Yun Performing Arts, a New York-based company that has long been targeted by the Chinese Communist Party. It notes the threatening messages viewed by the Epoch Times followed a series of similar threats directed at Shen Yun and venues hosting its performances earlier this year, all of which ended up being unfounded. No shootings took place in the end. The local presenters, it says, that the performances reported the threats to the police and the FBI in both cities. So they are taking it serious. Now, folks, interestingly here, U.S. lawmakers have been responding to the CCP's campaigns to export its religious persecutions to the United States. There are government actions now taking place to investigate, look into, and maybe stop the Chinese Communist Party's attempts from bringing its religious persecutions to U.S. soil. Hearings in Washington have been bringing light to the threat, and both Democrats and Republicans, both sides of the aisle, have expressed their concerns over the CCP's actions. Now, it seems the White House is also getting involved to investigate and expose the Chinese Communist Party campaign. This is through a newly established, just the other day, China Censorship Monitor and Action Group. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a break in less than 60 seconds, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Now, it seems the White House is also getting involved to investigate and expose the Chinese Communist Party's campaigns. This is through the newly established China Censorship Monitor and Action Group. The White House declared this in a presidential action on December 12th. Biden said this in the letter: "By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, and to monitor and address the effects of any efforts by the People's Republic of China," the CCP, they call it the PRC, "either directly or through proxies, to censor or intimidate any United States person, it is hereby ordered as follows." And he says that I am directing the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs and the Director of the National Economic Council to lead an interagency effort to oversee the development and execution of an integrated federal government strategy to monitor and address the effects of any efforts by the PRC, again the Chinese regime, to censor or intimidate in the United States or in any of its possessions or territories any United States person, including a United States company that conducts business in the PRC, right, in China, exercising its freedom of speech. Now, in addition to the task force this establishes under the executive office, it also includes representatives from throughout the U.S. government, including the Treasury Department, the Pentagon, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the CIA, the FBI, and a whole long list of others. It notes the task force will meet at least twice a year. It will also speak with stakeholders in the private sector, the media, and also with foreign U.S. allies and partners. And this could be particularly important since the Chinese Communist Party does have very aggressive efforts to censor American businesses. For example, Hollywood. The CCP controls a lot of the production studios. They control some of the biggest parts of Hollywood. It's very hard to get a film made without the CCP involved in it. A lot of the news media, again, has to censor on the behalf of the CCP if they want to even operate in China. Big tech, for example, gets pressured all the time by the Chinese Communist Party, and a whole lot of others. Even the NBA has been targeted by CCP censorship. You might remember if players even talk about slave labor in China, they get attacked. Now, I'd say it's even more important for folks like myself, frankly, and for the Epoch Times and others who dare to speak out against the CCP. The folks who have decided not to censor ourselves and not just go quiet. Because folks like myself, we get openly harassed and attacked because we dare to criticize the Chinese regime. And now we're finding out the Chinese Communist Party has this huge program designed to try to put us and others out of business, mainly by leveraging its connections with puppet journalists and puppet influencers and using them to trigger attacks through the U.S. legal system. That ties notably into the CCP's 3 warfares program, which means psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare. For the CCP, this is a military operation, leveraging foreign sources like American news outlets that it controls or influences. Now, the task force at the White House is also going to investigate and expose the CCP's actions. It's being put in place shortly before the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. So this is really more putting into place and then handing off to Trump, frankly. It seems this task force and others similar to it were brought about, at least partially, through the recent U.S. defense budget, meaning technically Congress made this necessary, right? Bipartisan. And this is something with bipartisan support. Now, folks, that said, hit the like button, leave a comment, and let's jump into some questions. Let's see here. First off, VW Birdhead. You're saying it concerns me that Donald J. Trump is so friendly with Xi, meaning Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party. I think it's dangerous. I would agree, and for this reason, well, for a couple reasons. The CCP model, the CCP method, is to basically negotiate deals, sign the deals, and then immediately violate the deals. You know, the Chinese Communist Party knows that if another country wants to make a business deal, they can get it. And if the CCP violates that business deal, even if they violate it on day one of signing it, even from the very beginning, they violate that business deal, or they take advantage of it and use it for subversion, which they often do. The process in free countries to investigate whether the Chinese Communist Party is adhering to the deal, the process of challenging it, the process of going through all the bureaucratic channels to deal with it, it may take 2, 3, 4 years or longer. And because the CCP also blocks a lot of investigations on its side of the ocean, remember when attempts were made to investigate the origins of the CCP virus, COVID-19, remember what happened with that? The CCP blocked the investigations and then puppeteered investigations through the WHO. Remember that? It's very hard for countries to investigate compliance of the Chinese Communist Party. So they'll sign anything. And that is concerning if Trump comes in and he's saying he's very friendly with Xi Jinping and he says he wants to sign a deal. Xi Jinping can just violate it on day one, which is what the CCP always does. And then, maybe we won't even notice they're violating it for the next 2 years. And then investigations and compliance take another 2 years, and Trump's out of office before anything can be done about it. And then it's in for good. We repeatedly deal with this with the CCP. I think the reality is the Chinese Communist Party is deceptive. The Chinese Communist Party is extremely hostile to the United States. The CCP has openly declared that it cannot exist on the same planet as the U.S. And they believe that for the CCP to survive, they have to destroy the United States. Why are we working with a country like this? Why are we working with the Chinese Communist Party when it's openly saying this? Now, to that point, Trump has done quite a bit to wage business war with the CCP. I do find it an ongoing concern if he's very friendly with Xi Jinping, personally. Judy Akeem, you're saying all these tech giants are seeing how Musk has only gotten bigger standing up for free speech and partnering with Trump, and they want in. That's a really good point. So that goes to the point we were talking about earlier, where, again, you have all these big tech heads and CEOs, for example, Tim Cook, Sam Altman with OpenAI, meeting with Trump. Some of them are donating to Trump's inauguration team, right? Which is important too, because Trump's basically privately funding his transition team, not inauguration team. Trump is privately funding that, which I would assume he's trying to do in order to prevent special interest from influencing who gets appointed. Now, you could argue that allowing big tech CEOs to donate money to that, it's probably because they want something out of it. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? I doubt that these big tech heads are meeting with Trump just because they feel like having dinner with him. They probably want something from Trump, right? Right? That's probably the case. Just me making assumptions here. But it is important because Trump privately funding his transition will, to an extent, prevent different political groups from trying to influence who gets in. Back to the point, though, of maybe these big tech companies looking at Elon Musk and what is happening with him. It's interesting because a lot of these big tech companies had been engaged in massive censorship, notably of conservatives. If you look at the Twitter files prior to Musk buying Twitter, if you look at the information that was released on Facebook and so on, and YouTube, we do know that a lot of the censorship on these platforms seem to be more targeted at one side of the political aisle. People questioning the vaccines, or people talking about COVID-19, or people talking about the integrity of the elections, or January 6th, or anything like that, or questioning the prevailing narratives on the many, many, many hit pieces that came out against Donald Trump during his entire administration, and later anybody who maybe demonstrated patriotic views during the time of Joe Biden. a lot of those people were censored. And we saw, of course, information come out on lists of individuals who were censored, what got them censored, and it is raising concerns that there was politicized censorship targeting, individuals on one side of the aisle. It's interesting now that a lot of the big tech companies have tried kind of washing their hands of that. Notably, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, head of Meta, which controls, again, Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg came out and pretty much threw the government under the bus and said basically they were only censoring because of government pressure. And that's going to raise some pretty big issues, I think, once Trump comes into office, and they are saying they're going to investigate what they call the censorship cartel on who was pulling the strings of that type of censorship, who was forcing that censorship, and whether that represented a type of government censorship or a type of media, maybe the big media engage in censoring their competitors. Again, we discussed the possibility of antitrust charges, something Trump has raised as possible punishments against these individuals. To the point of this, a lot of the big tech companies are trying to basically say they were strong-armed into it, and they were only doing it because they felt forced, right? And it is interesting now that, for example, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, he's even trying to appeal to conservatives again. It seems he's trying to clear the waters, let's say, and renew some of his relations with conservatives. And as Judy Akim is noting, that maybe they are looking at X, right, Twitter, under Elon Musk, and seeing how it changed after Musk came in and began protecting the speech of conservatives, and the effect that had. Despite all the articles talking about how Twitter is collapsing under Musk, go and look at the top downloaded apps on the App Store when it comes to social media and tell me what the top app is, right? Look at the traffic on X after Musk bought Twitter compared to prior to buying Twitter, and tell me where that stands. Twitter's X now, is formerly known as Twitter, is doing very well. Now, some people would say, well, Elon Musk is, basically allowing hate speech on his platform. Elon Musk is allowing, he's basically creating a radicalized platform and so on. What does it actually mean? Elon Musk is just protecting free speech. Now, he has deemed that criminal speech should not be allowed, but what are you finding? When they say it's giving a platform for conservatives, what does that actually mean? All it means is that conservatives are not being censored. And when they're not censored, you are witnessing the actual opinions that represent most of this country. You're actually seeing, when you have an uncensored platform, where people's opinions actually are. And the issue we've had for a very long time is that those viewpoints were not even allowed to be expressed. It's not that he's censoring the left by any means. If anything, a lot of those people are pushing themselves off the platform because they don't want free speech, ironically. And they're going to, the Blue Hole or whatever it is, these, other platforms that are coming up that do engage in censorship, right? They want censorship. That's their problem, right? They want censorship. That's the problem. And that's the real focus of the debate. California gal, you're saying accountability needs to be part of any dealings with the CCP. And just to be clear real quick, when I say they want censorship, I don't mean every person on the left wants censorship. I mean that some of the establishment, some of the key figures they want it. I don't think by any means they represent everybody. I do think it's a small subset that's basically been doing that. Back to the point, though, California guy, you're saying accountability needs to be a part of any dealing with the CCP. I agree. And, look, I've been personally targeted by the Chinese Communist Party, right? I have personally been threatened by them. Personally, I've been surrounded by Chinese agents who threatened to kill me. Personally, I've been attacked by big corporate media who have some CCP ties. Personally, I've witnessed this because I've been a target of it, frankly. And so maybe for me it's a little more real. But I can say this. Do we have free speech in this country if a foreign government can target people for having free speech? Do we have free speech in this country if a basketball player cannot criticize slave labor of Muslims in China? For example, as we witnessed with Enes Kanter Freedom, when he called out slave labor of Muslims in China and punished by the NBA for doing so. Is that free speech? Do we have freedom of expression in this country when a Hollywood studio cannot make a patriotic American movie because, again, they risk losing the China market, and if they lose the China market, they basically can't make a profit because of the way the industry has been set up? Do we have free speech in this country if you can't even make a film like that because the CCP has bought up so many of the production studios in the United States? Is that freedom of speech? Do we have freedom of speech if China news in general is censored because most of the media establishment works in China, has offices in China, and if they say something bad about the Chinese Communist Party, they get kicked out of the country? What happens when most of the mainstream news can't even report honestly on what's happening in one of the biggest countries in the world because they're afraid of getting kicked out and censored? Is that free speech? Right? And then what happens if you allow the Chinese Communist Party to attack by manipulating journalists and other people it's puppeteering in this country, and even manipulating our own legal systems, using, again, even military and government programs to do it in China where they research American law and then feed it to people here to go after people? Is that freedom? I would say that we're at risk of losing our basic sovereignty if we allow this to continue. And you could say, well, the target's like Falun Gong, and I understand some people don't understand it, right? To be fair, it's a different religion. Look, it's Falun Dafa right now, but who's it going to be next, right? The CCP is demonstrating its ability to manipulate American law and American censorship to destroy businesses and to target individuals and to extend its rule of law, which is totalitarian communism, into America. That's what the CCP is demonstrating right now, that it is capable of doing this. And so, for me, I find it deeply concerning. I find this, and I've said it once and I'll say it again, to me, this is one of the greatest threats the United States faces, things tied in with what's known as the United Front Work Department of the Chinese Communist Party. And again, I've been personally targeted by the CCP for this, but I'm only being targeted because I dare to speak out against it, The reason I get targeted is because I criticize it, because I expose it. Should that be allowed to happen on American soil, right? That's the real question here. And so, I find it really concerning. I think our basic system of government and freedom is at stake with this. And again, the target right now is a Chinese religion, Falun Dafa, which is actually more based in the U.S. now. But who's it going to be tomorrow, right? Who's it going to be tomorrow? Because the CCP persecutes a lot of people. The CCP persecutes Christians. The CCP persecutes Muslim Uyghurs. It persecutes Buddhists. It persecutes democracy activists. It goes against most of our news industry. It goes against most of our entertainment industry. Who is it going to be tomorrow? Any business operating in China, right? They're showing that they can destroy a business if they don't like it, is what the CCP is doing right now. James Dyson, you're saying, know thy enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles, you will never be defeated. Yeah, it's Sun Tzu, right? Yeah, Sun Tzu's Art of War. Know thy enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles, you will never be defeated. Yeah, actually, I really enjoy ancient Chinese stuff. I'm not so into the modern communist stuff. But if you want to read something really interesting, so everyone talks about Art of War and Sun Tzu. There are other military classics that are really good. I actually bought a collection of them that I really like. It's called the 7 Military Classics of Ancient China. And the first book of it is the 6 Secret Teachings, which is basically military doctrine and rules for leaders of good leadership. It's a fantastic book. But back to this point too, when it comes to the U.S. and its relations with the Chinese Communist Party regards us as an enemy. we regard them as a trading partner, right? We regard them maybe not as an ally. I think it's becoming kind of understood, wait a minute, why are they allied with everybody trying to destroy us right now? Why are they basically tied in with every international operation trying to undermine the interests of the United States? Why are they doing that? And then meanwhile, we have no problem being so intertwined on the economic side with them that it's hard to separate, right? Why do we do that? I think that we need to know our enemy and know ourselves, know what their values are, and know how they're trying to destroy our values. And I think then maybe we will not be defeated, right? Taking Sun Tzu into account here. Let's see, Moldegard, you're saying, Trump is the master of art of the deal. It makes a lot of sense to be on good speaking terms with adversaries. Yeah, I mean, I understand what he's doing. I understand how he's approaching this. But I think the nature of the Chinese Communist Party is a bit different. You know, the Chinese Communist Party has killed somewhere, I mean, look, if you talk about deaths under communism, if you go by the Black Book of Communism, which is a Harvard study, it says that communism has killed about 100 million people. That's a lot of people. You know, what did the Holocaust kill? You know, and of course that's a major genocide. Communism has killed 100 million people just by the Black Book of Communism. If you go by updated numbers, the number of people killed by communism is estimated to be 150 million or more, and counting, frankly. People become kind of numb when you talk about numbers like this. Communism has been the most destructive force against humankind in our entire known history. It is the most murderous, suppressive, and evil system that we have ever seen. I would say communism, we shouldn't even understand it as a political system. It's more like a religion. It's more like an evil religion, right? Because it tries to dictate the space of belief. It tries to dictate the ideas of good and evil. It tries to dictate basically everything. The only difference between communism and a normal religion is that it's atheistic, and it tries to replace God with the Communist Party. Right? That's the only real difference. And I would say that what it does is it creates a type of social religion that does not have the concept of forgiveness. It talks about the killing of all of its enemies, and it carries it out in practice. Communism advocates for violent revolution. Technically, it is a type of revolt against any kind of republic or freedom, freedom-loving country. And, it advocates for that. It openly advocates for it. If you want to talk about an insurrectionist ideology, communism advocates for it. Anybody who believes in communism should be seen as someone, at least interested in insurrection, because it advocates for the use of violence, the killing of innocent people, to bring about revolution. It talks about creating social enemies and so on. That's what communism is. The Chinese Communist Party has openly declared its hostility towards the United States. It has openly declared that they cannot exist until the United States is destroyed. The Chinese Communist Party, going by current numbers, has killed upwards of like 70 million people. The Chinese Communist Party right now as we speak is launching a genocide against Falun Gong, Falun Dafa. It has what's described as a genocide against Christians. You have about 100 million Christians in China. It uses slave labor and genocide against Muslim Uyghurs. It has been destroying and waging cultural genocide on Mongolians and Tibetans, and again, people in East Turkestan or Xinjiang. It has overturned democratic world orders, for example, the destruction of Hong Kong, gone against international agreements on that. It's talking about the hostile takeover of other countries like Taiwan to undermine the US dollar, overturn the US-led world order. It's trying to subvert basically every single business we have in this country, tied in with it, and it tries to export its totalitarian abuses and undermining of just about every basic freedom we have. Freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of expression, all of that is being suppressed through our relations with the Chinese Communist Party. And so at what point do we, and then they openly say they want to destroy us. At what point do we recognize that? That's the issue, I would say. And so, art of the deal, but you got to know your enemy. You know what I mean? And he may not, If he says Xi is his friend and not his enemy, and Xi Jinping is doing this, look, if you think somebody's your friend and they're talking about murdering you behind your back every day of the week, you got to know when to cut that friendship off. You know what I mean? Like, you got to know when to end that relationship. It's not good for you. Like, seriously. Let's see here. James George, you're saying, are transnational corporations and American multinational firms finally understanding the writing on the wall, or are they realizing they're losing out on American customers? I believe you're talking about big tech having meetings with Donald Trump. I think what's happening is this. Okay, I've been doing some research because, I've talked before about kind of an international economic shakeup taking place. Those of you who've been watching the show for maybe the past couple of weeks know that I've talked about this a bit. I've talked about how a lot of the economies in other countries are on the brink of collapse. A lot of Europe is at this state, China's at this state. A lot of Latin American countries are basically saying that if Trump deports people, they cannot handle that amount of people basically go back to the countries. A lot of them believe they're going to be destabilized. Trump's threats of 25% tariffs on Canada, it is causing such a stir politically right now that Justin Trudeau may step down from office. It could happen even today or tomorrow. That's where they're at. France, Macron, they're having a government collapse right now. Germany is facing government, basically a remaking of their government right now. The UK is going through that. If you look at Mexico and the fact that a lot of their economy is with the United States, and a lot of that's auto manufacturing. If Trump brings back manufacturing of cars to the United States and revives that industry, that's going to basically decimate the Mexican economy. If Trump revives, even without tariffs, if he revives American energy production, that is going to have a very massive impact on the Canadian economy and the Mexican economy, and probably a lot of the Middle East as well. The extent to which he decides to do this is going to be important. But if you look at actually the international structure of business, this is where things get really interesting. I was reading, I can't remember the exact numbers, so don't take this as absolute, but it was something like 70 or 75% of publicly listed companies are American. American companies, to a very uneven extent, dominate the global economy. And, there were writings going back several years in Europe, for example, prior to a lot of the censorship we've seen and the fines they have against American tech companies, basically bringing attention to this. They were saying that they believe that because America got a foothold in the high-tech space, because, look, America, who invented the internet? It used to actually be controlled by the U.S. government. ICANN and IANA were under the U.S. government. Obama is the one who relinquished that, right? A lot of this started with DARPANet and military research and ARPANET, things under the U.S. military, right? That's where it all came from. Major companies that built the core systems on the internet are almost all American companies. And even when it comes to a lot of the military complex, when it comes to most electronics and so on, a lot of the industries, even our close allies have built, were given to them by us. A lot of the chip manufacturing you have in Taiwan and South Korea and other countries, a lot of that was given to them by America. A lot of the auto industries, Germany and Japan, exist because we've let them put 100% tariffs on us. We did that after World War II to help their economies. A lot of the industries other countries have are from us, actually. Even the Chinese economy, if you want to talk about China. The CCP's economy was in shambles up until they did the reform and opening up, and American foreign investment in manufacturing is basically where most of their money came from. It wasn't from communism, it was from capitalism, as ironic as that is. The issue you have with global government is this. If you pull back from that, if the United States were to stop sending money around, if we were to stop giving money to these countries, if we were to stop allowing them to have uneven trade deals with us, if we allowed them to stop sending the people they can't take care of, right, the poor peasants and so on, to our country because they don't have jobs in their countries, if we stopped that, it would create an even playing field. And on that even playing field, America dominates by leaps and bounds. And I'm not just saying this as an American patriot, which I am, right? I'm saying this as someone just looking at the numbers, and I'm saying this as somebody who's watched what is being publicly said in some of these other countries. They know that they cannot survive as they currently are if that were to happen. Now, the way that Europe has been dealing with some of that is they fine big tech companies. They have been talking about basically evening the ground on the profits of big tech by basically taking the money that big tech companies are making in their countries and then using that to fund their government and other projects and startups and so on, because they want to create their own domestic tech companies that can compete with the United States. That's what they're doing, plain and simple. And they're fining American companies in the hundreds of millions and the billions of dollars every single year because they want to basically even the playing field. What we're witnessing is really a type of global equity. Yes, it has been at the cost of quality of life in America, but because America has such an uneven balance of power, some countries, in terms of globalism and so on, some countries view that is a necessary thing if they are going to not basically be third world countries, right? Let's just be honest. And so that's really what's been going on. Now, Trump talking about bringing back manufacturing, bringing back, the auto industry, bringing back the energy industry, bringing foreign investment, having basically low or no taxes, he's even saying, and then using tariffs against countries in order to even the playing field and stop sending money everywhere. A lot of the world is in absolute panic right now because they cannot survive that with the way that things currently are. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to die. It doesn't mean they're all going to go belly up. It just means that the way they've been running things is not sustainable unless they're sucking the blood out of America. You know what I mean? It just means that they need to redo how they work, basically. And Trump, because of this, is forcing a fundamental reform in terms of the way a lot of countries function, even the degree to which they allow for socialist policies and redistribution of wealth, even the degree to which they allow for very leisure cultures because, they can fund it because they take a lot of money from America, really, right? They're coming to terms with the fact that may be coming to an end, and they don't want that, you know what I mean? And so when it comes to these big tech companies, though, for a lot of them, they've been dealing with annual fines from these countries. They've been dealing with the fact that they're getting fined and sued and everything else from Australia and Europe for the most part, and other countries. They're dealing with the fact that Brazil, a random judge in Brazil, can, threaten massive fines on American social media just for allowing freedom of speech. And unless the federal government acts to stop that, they're concerned that at the very least it's affecting their profit margins and their shareholders. But on a much broader extent, these countries are kind of destroying American business. They're damaging American business, and it's making it hard for them to compete with the up-and-coming companies that these countries are trying to fund using the money they're taking from us. And so it does make sense that they're looking to Trump and saying, hey, please come into office and stop the plunder of American business and innovation. That's kind of what's happening right now. Emotion 007, you're saying, Josh, with the way we subsidize Canada and the $100 billion a year, we might as well take over and free the people. I have some Canadian friends who hope that happens, by the way. By the way, Trump, I think he's saying it jokingly, but now in all of his public statements, he refers to Justin Trudeau as the governor of the 51st state of Canada. Because, he was joking about this, and now he just refers to Canada that way. Now, I don't think Americans would necessarily want Canada because they would probably change our political system. But it is a point, and I don't know if Canada really wants that anyways. But it is a point that we subsidize a lot of governments through trade deficits. That is just a reality, and we subsidize a lot of governments because we let them fine American companies. To the extent that even some countries in Europe, their governments are basically funded by fining American companies, right? Anyways, there's a big shakeup coming, folks. I don't think people have really come to terms with what this will look like. Really, I'm looking at some of the writing on the wall with this, and maybe this is why there's been. I'm just speculating here. Maybe this is why we actually saw so many global efforts trying to stop populism, which is ironic because they say this under the guise of defending democracy. Populism is democracy. How do you define populism? It's what the average person wants. It's what the majority of the populace wants. That's populism. Isn't that democracy? Correct me if I'm wrong. What is the alternative? Well, there are people who believe that the will of the public goes against public interest. They believe the average person is too dumb to have democracy. And so they're pushing for autocracy. They're pushing for totalitarianism under the guise of the label of democracy. Isn't that ironic? Anyways, I think they're coming to terms with the fact that there's a big shakeup coming. There is a big, big shakeup coming. And a lot of countries are not going to be able to operate the way they have been once this happens. That is the reality we are now entering. Let's see here. Seen Tama, you're saying, do you have a booking reading list to understand the dangers and threat of the CCP? I would recommend, Epoch Times published an editorial series called The 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party. I would recommend that as one of the best books you could possibly read to understand the Chinese Communist Party. Actually, Epoch Times published that. It caused such a shakeup in China that it started a movement of Chinese people quitting the Chinese Communist Party, the Youth League, and the Young Pioneers. To the extent that the number last I checked was over 400 million Chinese people have quit one of those 3 organizations. We do also have, we were going to start a book club. I still have it. I haven't updated it in a while. You can go to joshuaphillip.com/book-club. I do have some book recommendations there. I know I haven't updated it in a while, but we do have it. And again, we have some book recommendations on that site. Let's see, another question here. James Dyson, you're saying lefty perception. Communism is bad. It's other countries' problems. Yeah, I know. One of the problems you have with communism is that a lot of people don't understand what communism is. And because a lot of, communism basically is the hand holding the stick that has the carrot on the end. And a lot of people who believe in communism, they think the carrot is communism. They're like, oh, free healthcare, oh, free money, the carrot, right? They don't understand that there's a deception in play, the deception being the stick, right? And even less do they understand the real purpose of it, the hand holding it. Because every time communism is implemented, they find out what that hand is. They find out that it's a totalitarian system that promises one thing and gives something else. Now, maybe you get free health care, but it's not very good. But aside from that, really what it represents is a type of absolute control over an individual and a, communist manipulation of human religious belief, freedom of expression, and basically the destruction of every value of personal freedom. That's what communism is. And, and oftentimes being done through, the force of mass violence and mass surveillance. What communism tries to do is replace God and replace religion with a massive totalitarian state. That's what communism is. It's about overturning religion and replacing religion with a system where they believe that they can social engineer good and evil. You know, if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of what communism really is, I would actually say that it goes back to what true evil is. True evil is when people believe that their suffering in life is an injustice and they blame God for the injustice. That's true evil. The most evil people in history are those types. They go through hard, maybe it's oftentimes even very faithful people. They go through a hard time and they suddenly change their faith. They turn against religion. They say, I'm suffering because God is unjust, right? Or why doesn't God fix my problems? Without understanding that, I would say hardships sometimes are part of the process of moral refinement. We're not tested or refined by easy times. We are tested and refined by difficulties. You know, saints, if you look at religions like Christianity, saints were defined by the very hardships they faced. The saint defined as the one against a certain human vice would be the one who struggled the most with dealing with that vice, because it was the struggle for good, the human nature attempt to become a more righteous or moral person that defined religious practice. If you look at sainthood and what it defines, it's that. It wasn't that the saints were saying, why am I facing persecution for my belief? It must be God's fault. No, they say this is the result of evil in men trying to restrict the rule of heaven. That's what they would say. Communism tries to argue on a fundamental point this idea that evil exists and hardship and suffering exists, not because man is evil, but because there's an inherent, written into the very nature of the code of the world, a type of inherent evil that they blame on God. And so they think that by having a state, an all-powerful state, replacing that they can get rid of evil, that they can get rid of suffering. And the irony of a system like that is they create more suffering than any system we've ever witnessed in history. They've killed, again, upwards of 150 million people, if you go by current estimates. They destroy and persecute anybody who dares speak out against them. They represent the greatest form of evil, ironically under the banner of saying they oppose it. But unfortunately, a lot of people who believe in it, they believe that little carrot on the stick. You want to get rid of suffering. Wow. You know what I mean? And they follow it. You want to get rid of suffering, but what does that actually mean? What does that mean in practice? Well, we've seen it over and over and over again. It means creating a system of government that is fundamentally evil by every definition of the word. A system of government that tries to eliminate free will because they believe that free will is the cause of that, and to micromanage the winners and losers in everything, which goes, I think, against the fundamental qualities of human nature. I think we've seen over and over again the problems of communism. But unfortunately, people, some of them still believe in it, I think because they fail to understand what it actually is. And that's why you have college kids saying, that wasn't communism, that was Leninism, that was Maoism, that was that guy who did it wrong. No, he did it right. You just saw what it actually is in practice. That's the issue with it. Folks, that said, serious conversation today. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I always enjoy talking with you all. Please leave a comment, hit the like button. Again, it seems censorship is being lifted suddenly on YouTube, which is great. It does help us quite a bit for the algorithms if you like the video. Also, share this video, tell a friend or family member about Crossroads. It helps us a lot as well. And as always, folks, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.